Hello, MotoAmerica fans. It's time for another episode of Off Track with Carruthers and Bice. You'll laugh, you'll cry, and you may even learn something from this unlikely pair and their special guest. The mic is yours, Paul and Sean.
Hello, MotoAmerica fans. Welcome to Off Track with Carruthers and Bice. It's MotoAmerica's weekly podcast, which means we do it every week, which makes sense, right, Sean?
Makes sense. I can't believe every week we do this. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't looked lately on the number, but it's 230 or something that we've done.
Up there. Yeah.
I can't believe I've had that many conversations with you.
It's a good thing we keep track of the number anyway. So
yeah, right?
About it. Yeah.
Well, today we're looking at doing something a little bit different. You know, we've got the Superbike Championship starting, the Medallia Superbike Championship starting up here in 3 weeks or something.
Yep.
So I thought, you know, let's talk about Superbikes. Let's see what we all think about who's going to do what and why, and kind of throw some things around, generate a little bit more interest in a series that's already got a ton of interest, because, you know, there's nothing like the first race, because everybody goes into it thinking that they're going to be, that they have a chance of being a MotoAmerica Superbike champion. And as we know, there's only a handful of them that actually do have that shot. But, you know, everybody's got a fresh start and new hopes, and we see what they can do. So we're gonna discuss that series in depth. And to do so, we're gonna bring in Roger Hayden, who's, everybody knows Roger. He's basically become the face of MotoAmerica Live Plus. You know, he's there every week, every race, and he's just become a fixture. He's become quite good at the job, which is not an easy job. I can't imagine you and I, you know, can sit here and talk for an hour a week, but he sits there and talks for hours and hours and hours for, you know, 3 or 4 straight days. So
yeah, it's incredible.
He's become very adept at it. He's good at it. The fans love him. We love him. We're happy to have him. And he's also a good person to sit down and talk to on this Superbike preview show, because he obviously is a student of racing and was a very, very good racer himself. So he's kind of comes from a different angle than what you and I do, where we're just, you know, we're guys that wish we could do it, but don't. And he's a guy that's done it. So Roger, welcome to our little podcast here. And I hope you're doing well out there in Kentucky.
Yeah, doing well. Thanks for having me. Getting through winter here in Kentucky. So looking forward to, we had Daytona, but I'm looking forward to getting the season really started in a couple weeks.
Yeah, it's kind of cool that we do the Daytona thing. And that's like opening day, big deal, Daytona 200, blah, blah, blah. And then, you know, we have a little bit of a gap to kind of catch our breath. And then all of a sudden it's like we get to build all this excitement again, because the classes that didn't run at Daytona now start their championship. So it's kind of 2 opening days.
Exactly. And plus, I mean, Daytona this year with so many riders in it just had so much hype, you know, and it was like so exciting. I mean, the race had 8 guys in it that could win. And I think that just kind of gets everybody fired up for the rest of the season. And then also just seeing the spectator attendance at Daytona. You know, it's been a long time since I've seen the infield that full. And so it just gives you that excitement, you know, more hype, and, you know, more people around just creates a bigger buzz.
Yeah, I mean, we always say, oh, it's, you know, the good old days and the good old days. And the good old days were good, don't get me wrong. But I mean, I think we're getting back to the point where, you know, it's not back to the good old days, but it's pretty damn close. I mean, we've got a lot of international riders at the 200. Like you said, there's a bunch of guys who can win. There's a bunch of guys on the lead lap. It's drafting. It's everything that Daytona is supposed to be. And, you know, it's only going to continue to get better.
Yeah. And also, too, I mean, I'm not really used to this. It hasn't been like this for a while, but now I'm starting to have to leave my hotel a little bit earlier to get to the track, because, you know, there's a little bit of a line to get in.
Right.
You know, I mean, I'm not waiting forever, but you're not just driving straight through. There's usually, you know, 5 or 10 cars in front of you, and they move them pretty quick. But it's pretty cool to see. You know, when you're waiting in line, you don't really like it, but overall, you know, it's great to see the crowds growing the way they are.
Well, that's the thing. It's like, be careful what you wish for, right? It's like we want a bunch of people at the races, but none of us want to get up an hour earlier to go try to get through. And you know, like MotoGP, I mean, you do a MotoGP race in Spain and you're up at 4 a.m. just to get through and get your spot and get in and get settled. But yeah, I mean, MotoAmerica, all the races have gotten to the point now where it's nice when you pull up and you actually do have to sit in line to get through the gate.
Yeah, and also the lines aren't like crazy long because of the way the passes are now. I think all the tracks and even the MotoAmerica staff has kind of grown with it.
Yep.
And they get them through the line pretty dang quick.
All right, Sean. Sean, you ready to talk about superbikes?
I am. I was just going to say with Paul, we've said this before, but a lot of times if we're running the riders over to the press conference or back or whatever, it's always a good problem when we have trouble getting the golf cart through the crowd to get them over to the media center. So that's always a good sign when we get a good crowd like that. So hopefully Road Atlanta is going to be the same way. But this is weird this year for us to start. I mean, maybe my memory's not serving me well, but when was the last time we started the season in Superbike at Road Atlanta? I mean, it's been COTA for so long that this is different.
Yeah, it is different. And
yeah.
My memory's not jumping right into shape here this morning either. But it's
on the COTA.
I think Road Atlanta is a good place to start.
Me too.
When we've had COTA races, I don't want to say they just haven't been really a preview of what you can totally expect for the whole year, because COTA is kind of itself. It's like, it's just different. And especially when we had the Europeans come over and kick our ass there,
yes.
Tony and Danilo, they come over and they kick our ass, and it's at COTA, and you kind of like, well, let's see what happens when we get to Road Atlanta. Well, exactly. Now we go right to Road Atlanta and everybody gets their eyes pretty open there. Roger, that's a difficult place. We obviously don't have a Superbike guy coming in for a first year in the series and going to Road Atlanta, but that's an eye opener for those guys when they do come, right?
Yeah, especially Road Atlanta. I mean, it's a fun track. Everybody likes it, but I don't think a lot of people realize how hard it is on a Superbike. That first section of the track, you're wrestling the bike, and it's one of those places. It's kind of weird. You'll hear a lot of riders talking about arm pump, and I don't know why it is about that track, but it's definitely different. But it's cool to start the series at a track where everybody knows, and kind of come in and got a little bit of a time, and then also nobody's really tested there the off season, so everybody kind of starts on a level playing field going into Atlanta.
All right, well, let's get started on this. Now, I'm going to tell you real quick what my thoughts are. I mean, Jake Gagne has become the new king of this class. Yep. Cameron Beaubier went to Europe and he's done the Moto2 thing. But it seems to me the big story is we have Jake Gagne, we have Cameron Peterson, and we have Matthew Skoltz, which they are the big three of the Superbike Championship, at least for the last couple of years. Now, this year, what's that?
Did you mention Peterson?
Yes, I did.
Oh,
Peterson, Gagne, and Skoltz. So correct. Now this year we have suddenly the old school guys coming back. And I mean that by 5-time champion Cameron Beaubier, 1-time champion Tony Elias. And we also have Josh Herrin, who was also a Superbike champion. It seems like a hell of a long time ago, which kind of was. And he's coming back on a Superbike. So to me, it's almost like it's a little bit weird that it's like the big three have kind of been pushed aside a little bit as far as what's newsworthy. And the big story seems to be at this point, at least going to Road Atlanta, the other three, which would be Cameron, Tony, and Herrin, just because we don't know what to expect. Like with Cameron isn't the question. I believe Cameron, and you can disagree with me or agree with me, but I think Cameron's going to be better than he was when he left, because he's been fighting for his life for a couple of years. Like he'll tell you, it's like when you're doing that Moto2 class, it's like every lap is like a Grand Prix, right? So you're trying every lap of every practice, every qualifying in the race, and you're just in a constant battle. So I think he as a rider will be stronger. I think the question with him, and let's just start with him and then we'll bounce back and forth. But I think the question with him isn't Cameron, but like how close the bike will be and how quick of a start he can get off to.
I think you're 100% right about Cam. The big question isn't going to be Cam's talent, but the bike is going to be there. The team is somewhat new to Superbike as well, even though they got some guys that have been around Superbikes for a while. But as a one unit working together, it's kind of a newer team they got last year under their belt. So it's going to be interesting to see because I know Cam definitely has a talent. He's definitely the most naturally talented guy that I raced with for sure in the US. But it's going to be a different situation for Cam this year. When he moved up to Superbike, he went to a team that was winning titles. And so now it's going to be a little bit different. He's going to a team that hasn't won any Superbike races. So it's going to be a little different situation. But I think that just adds to the excitement to it is the unknown. And Cameron's definitely a great rider. That team was making huge strides at the end of last year, battling for podiums. So see what they did this off season. But I think the big thing is how quick can Cam get used to the BMW? It's going to be different than the Yamaha, different than the Moto2 bike. So we're going to see. I mean, it might take him a couple races to get used to it, but Cam is eventually going to figure out. But the big question mark is, can him get used to that bike and gel and feel as good as he did on the Yamaha?
Yeah, and Sean, you can chime in here in a second, but it's like the thing I kind of have it in my, and I might be wrong, but I just kind of picture things, at least in the first couple of races. I picture maybe the three guys that are coming back actually racing together, but it might be for third, fourth, fifth, sixth in that spot until they either get their shit together to the point where they're capable of going Gagne's pace, or it's quickly apparent that they're not going to. Does that make sense, Sean?
Yeah, boy, I'll tell you, there's a lot of unknowns. I mean, Roger hit the nail on the head. The thing that's been strange this year about Cameron Beaubier is, I mean, technically we have that team has not even announced their team yet. Although, we've seen the season entry list. It's on our website now. And we know that, they've got 3 riders on that team. And, PJ came on last year on that bike as well. And even in the little bit of testing that we've seen or heard about Cameron doing, he was fast on that bike, but it's a huge unknown. I mean, for him to be on that, it's because we've even seen what's going on with that bike a little bit in World Superbike, although yesterday Garrett Gerloff went 4th fastest in one of the sessions. So we know the bike is absolutely capable. It's going to be a real eye-opener to see where they are at when they start out, and especially for Cameron. One of the things I wanted to ask Roger about this, Roger, you raced for Suzuki and Honda and Kawasaki. You raced for a lot of brands. Did you ever have a situation where you were on a previous brand and had some success and then, switched to a different team or different brand, and you felt like for a while it was like, oh wait, that's my team over there in the other part of the paddock. It took you a little while to get used to being on this different team. Did that ever happen to you in your career?
No, not really, because when I rode for Kawasaki for so long, and then when I moved from them, they went away. That's when they took their road race team away. Then right. I went to Jordan Motorsports for a while and was there for a while. And then when I went to Yosh, they wasn't racing no more. So it seems like maybe I'm the common denominator there. It seems like whenever I've been switching teams, they've kind of they went away. So it's not been a huge problem for me or a situation that I'm used to.
So Sean, this might be our last podcast because Roger might have just wrecked our career.
I've been on here before. You're still going.
Oh, that's true.
What I was going to say. Thankfully, he has been on before. So if it would have been wrecked, it would have gotten wrecked before this. So the other thing I wanted to ask you about, Roger, so you mentioned about Road Atlanta and arm pump, and I'm not trying to necessarily segue into Cameron Peterson, but I did want to ask you. So he had gotten arm pump, or he had gotten that compartment surgery after testing at Buttonwillow and had it going, had it done before going into Daytona, which was pretty incredible that he got it taken care of because there were some complications. And you mentioned about Road Atlanta at the arm pump. Did you ever have that surgery? I can't remember if you did.
Yeah, I had it. I had it
Okay.
early on when I was about 18, and then 1 year during the season at Yosh, I had it done first or second year. After Laguna 1 year, I went and had it done.
Does it help?
Yeah, it does. It definitely helps. For most guys, it does. Some it doesn't help as much. The good thing about it is it kind of heals up quicker than you think now because of technology. Even though I mean Cam raced right away at Daytona, so obviously he did 200 miles there, but Superbike and a super sport bike is going to be totally different. But it definitely helps, and a lot of guys are getting it.
Roger should have just had Velcro put in there. Had it more than once. Hey, okay, so let's move on to the second guy who's coming back, and that's Tony Elias. Now,
Yeah.
you know him better than anybody, Roger, because you were his teammate even the year when he won the championship. Now, he's a guy that to me doesn't get old. Like that he just seems like a 20-year-old kid, and I picture him being that way forever. And also his throttle hand doesn't seem to get old either. He doesn't seem to scare easily. He's obviously got a lot of talent. Now he's coming back with the Vision Wheel M4 X-Star team that he was with prior. Now, from the outside looking in, I don't think he was real happy with the team, with the bike, or what have you in that year that he was with them. And I don't know what's going to be different. And I think with Tony, he has to get off to a good start. He has to get confident. He has to make the bike, the way that he wants it. Nobody in the paddock, messes with a bike more than Tony. I mean, you can go out on Hot Pit and see, like suspension parts and swing arms laying on the ground that he's actually gone to that degree. So what's your insight tell you about how you think Tony's going to perform after coming back?
Well, I think kind of the same thing we talked about with some of the other riders could possibly be a bit of a slow start. I mean, he set out last year, the year before, he only did a couple races. So he's kind of 2 years out. And even though he's did, some track days, on a stock bike and did some coaching and stuff, it's totally different than racing. So I think one thing, I mean, even when he was talking about when he came back testing the first time, his eyeballs were about to pop out of his head. Things were coming up so quick. And they haven't did a lot of testing to kind of knock all that rust off and to get used to it, not doing a lot of testing. Weather hasn't helped either. So I think it's another guy that I think might take a couple races. But the thing is, if you do start a little bit slow, you can get frustrated. You just got to, stay on it. And I think Tony really believes in himself. And, I know that the Vision Wheel M4 team hasn't had the results they wanted in Superbike the last couple of years, but I think this can be a jump start. Bring Tony in with his experience and what Escalante did last year, and hopefully they can sort it out.
Now, you would know this because you were in his team the year he won the championship. But I just discussed a little bit about how he does make wholesale changes to the motorcycle. But that year, in his years where he was really successful with Yosh, did he continue to do that? Or did he find a setup that he liked, like most guys do, and then just tinker with it?
Well, for a little bit. I mean, he definitely liked to change stuff a lot. But, we was a factory team then. And, the Yosh Japan, we had certain limits that we could stay in, for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
About the swing arms. It wasn't like, we design our own or, different offsets. Don't get me wrong, we had a ton of stuff. But, there was a limit. You couldn't go down a crazy path. You could change a lot of the stuff each weekend that you wanted, and he definitely, like to change stuff. But at the same time, there was parameters that we kind of had to stay in. There were a lot of parameters, though. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying there wasn't much to change because there was a lot, but you couldn't go down your own path if you wanted.
Right. Somebody said no at some point.
Yes.
Guys, so one of the things I wonder about this time around for Tony is before, I mean, he went from from Yosh to, the M4 team, what it was called then, now Vision Wheel M4 X-Star Suzuki. But it was kind of like he went from the Suzuki to the Suzuki, and I think he had a lot of feel for the bike at Yosh, and he's been a couple years away from that bike now. The bike's probably developed more than it was there, but maybe he's not going to come in there and go, I want it to be just like it was last year, because there wasn't a last year for him. Do you think there's anything about that, Roger, that it's going to be different now, maybe?
Well, I'm sure they probably talked about where things kind of went wrong the first year they were together. And probably, John and Chris have a ton of experience as well, and they've run a lot of successful programs. So I'm sure they probably have a game plan going into the year and, try to sort that out. But Tony's definitely, man, he's pretty incredible on the bike. And there's sometimes some races you think he's out of it, and here he comes. So he definitely has a talent. And I also think he's going to be motivated. When you set out for 2 years and it's not by your choice, now he gets this opportunity to come in and show everybody, what you were missing out, why you should have signed me the last 2 years, and then also moving forward. So he doesn't want to retire. So he's got a lot to prove, and I think he's going to try his hardest to prove it. And I think Tony's going to bring his best this year.
All right, let's move on to Josh Herron, the third guy who's coming back and also a previous champion. Now, Josh is moving from, he had a very successful last year. He cleaned up on the super sport bike, and he was rewarded with a superbike ride for this year. Josh is one of those guys. I mean, we all know how talented he is, but we also, I don't know, maybe I'm alone in this. I don't think I am, but there's times when I couldn't tell you if he's going to win by 15 seconds or finish 7th. And it's not that he's inconsistent, but he can be. And I think sometimes he can be his own worst enemy. Now, going into this season, I can tell by how hard he's been training. He'll tell you that he hasn't been a guy that's been big on training, but you can see this year, if you look at his Strava, he's been riding bicycles basically every day. He's been putting in good miles. He's been, he's doing some altitude stuff, and he seems to be doing all the right things for a guy that's got an opportunity to race a superbike. Now, what I wonder from you, Roger, and I don't know if you've been in this position or not, I don't think you have, but he's basically going from being on teams where he's the second superbike guy and his teammate is the one that's expected to do the business. Now he's alone on a team, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing for you to be your only guy. I don't know if you need help with setup, or I don't know if it's motivating to have a teammate, or if you think everything's okay just by yourself.
Well, I think sometimes it's good to have another teammate, because when you kind of got a question about something, if you have a good teammate that you can work well together, you can ask a question. Or, when you're the only rider and you're struggling with something, and you tell the team, and they might think, well, just maybe it's not, maybe it's you. Well, when you have a teammate, you're both saying the same thing. The team has to address that area. So it's obviously, a problem for whatever it is. So I think it's good. It has good points, and then also, the bad points. But I think what you said in the beginning is, the inconsistencies a little bit. And Josh knows that. I'm actually working with Josh a little bit this year as a coach. And, all those things that you brought up, for the most part, he kind of has a pretty good idea, and he wants to work on that stuff. And he has been motivated and lost weight. I think the biggest thing for him might be the lack of track time on the bike before the first race. Yeah, he rode the V2 last year. This is totally different. That's going to bring nothing. I don't think anything what he learned last year really over to a superbike, because the superbike and the super sport bike, it doesn't matter what it is, it's so different. The last time he rode a superbike, it was a Suzuki or a Yamaha, which is going to feel totally different than the Ducati. So I think his big hurdle, and we talked about this with some other guys, is might take a few races to figure it out. But I think Josh is really kind of looking at himself. And, he has a lot of experience now. And I think that's what kind of, when you get older, like, kind of Josh is now, you're okay to look at yourself. I think we all did that at a certain point in our career.
And at some point when I talked to him, he kind of admitted that, like, maybe not having a teammate could be a good thing for him, because I think he's the type, and we're probably all naturally this way, but I think he was the type that would come in and he'd look at the timing screen and he's focusing perhaps too much on the teammate that's ahead of him or slower than him or whatever, instead of focusing on himself. And he told me that, like, he thinks not having a teammate make him can just focus on him and not worried about what the guy on the other side of the tent's doing.
Well, obviously that's kind of going back to the point where he knows that he needs to just focus on himself. I mean, even if and just there's just a lot of little things that I think he's going to work on this year, and he's going to be a little bit different. But racing is more exciting when Josh Herrin is at the front. There is absolutely no doubt about that.
I think we saw that a couple of weeks ago.
He's aggressive. He's not there to make friends, and it makes it exciting to watch.
Okay, well, I'm going to put this one on Sean. Sean, let's talk about Jake Gagne.
Okay. Wow.
Go for it.
Jake Gagne, my gosh. I mean, Jake Gagne became what Cameron Beaubier was. And it's almost like he stepped up because Cameron wasn't there anymore. Did he step up because it was his time? Did he finally become healthy with his leg situation? But he seems to be pretty unbeatable. I mean, obviously the wins that he's put together and with that team, and, now even more so with Cameron Peterson there to, on that team, they get along so well. And I think you talk about a teammate and how they can help you. I think those guys push each other pretty well. Plus, I mean, he's obviously going to want to be like, well, okay, the guy that used to have this ride is now back again. He's on a different bike, but I've got to show that, him on a different bike, I'm still the man. So it's going to be interesting to see. And, I mean, Jake's been riding a long time, and understands riding. He went over last year and raced in World Superbike too. So, he's obviously the guy to beat. I want to mention something. I want to go back and mention something about Herrin for a minute, though, because it's funny, Roger and Paul, you guys had pointed out that thing about him being by himself. He's had a lot of success when he's only been the one rider on that team. I mean, look at what he did with Richard Stanboli. I mean, he still has the track record at Laguna Seca. And I know it's a different bike now, but one question I wanted to ask to Roger, and it's about last year with these well-documented issues that Danilo Petrucci had with that bike and those Dunlops. And it's not something that Josh Herrin doesn't covet Pirelli tires. He doesn't think maybe that bike isn't good with Dunlops. He's a Dunlop rider and has been. So what do you think, Roger, about all of that when it shook out regarding Danilo? Do you think he talked about that a little bit too much? And do you think that's going to be any kind of a factor? Is that bike hard to ride on Dunlop tires, or maybe not so much this year because they've had some time to develop it? I know that's a lot, but what do you think about that, Roger?
Well, I don't know. You used to hear a couple of years ago that Dunlop made their bike around the Yamaha, and I don't believe that. Now, do I believe that maybe it took him a while to get used to the way that the Dunlops feel, because it's going to be totally different than, what he's ever had before, possibly. But it's hard to, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to, it's hard to criticize, but, it's just, I don't know if that can be the case. I think, it worked on the Suzuki. Josh didn't have a problem with them on the V2. Again, the ranking Super Sport is totally different. But, for one, Josh can't go into the season thinking that, because then it's in your head. And then if you have a bad half day at a track or track day or testing, and then you're going to start planting that seed in your head. So you got to go into the year and thinking that, your tires and everything is just, they're going to work great on your bike as well, whether it's true or not. You definitely can't go in thinking that.
So Paul, back to Jake Gagne again for a minute. The guy's unbelievable with the mind game that he has. And I'm not saying he plays mind games. I'm saying his thought process inside his head is he's just so chill and cool as a cucumber all the time that he just is coming into the season with all kinds of confidence, I think. I mean, why would he not? It's just going to be continuation. You know, you wonder, okay, you got Cameron Beaubier and you got Josh, you got Tony, Josh Herron, you got Tony, but you know, he's got his own teammate, Cameron Peterson, who showed clearly he was coming on last year. So I don't know if he doesn't seem to be affected by any of that stuff. Do you think?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Jake's a unique individual. I mean, he's like you said, he's so chill, he's so calm. But I think there's a lot of stuff burning inside there that you don't really see. But I think when he puts the helmet on, he's a different person. It's like he's like the nice guy down the street, but the guy's got dead bodies in his basement. You know what I mean? Jake's kind of like that, and not that he's a murderer, but you know what? He does murder these guys on the racetrack, or he has for 2 years.
Right.
The thing I'm curious to see is what the presence of Cameron Beaubier has on not only Jake but everybody, because he comes with a certain amount of star power now, and I think that's what racing internationally does for you, no matter if you succeed or you don't succeed. And he had a lot more success than people give him credit for. You know, you don't set a lap record and be on pole position at COTA on a Moto2 bike if you don't know what you're doing. So
That's true.
So it's going to be interesting to me. Like, I think Cameron Beaubier, and he's not that he without trying to be, so he's got that. I think he now has a bit of that star power. When he walks around the paddock, he's somebody, you know, not that he wasn't anybody before, but he's somebody more now. And I'm curious to see how everybody reacts to that. But Gagne seems to me like the guy that would react the least to it. What do you think about that, Roger?
Well, I think Jake, and I mean, especially him, because he's been dominating the last 2 years. Really, nobody has really put up a fight in the last 2 years, if I'm honest. Last lap battle to the flag. And then Jake has to hear, you know, the critics that say, well, Tony's not in the class no more. Josh Hayes isn't in the class no more. Cam Beaubier's not there no more, which was the big one people would say. Now here's his opportunity to come in and beat the guy that everybody keeps saying, since he's not there, is the reason why you're winning. Not everybody's saying that, but some critics do say that. And I think he's going to have to be coming in with a lot of motivation to win, to beat Cam Beaubier, and to beat him straight up. And I think it's going to be exciting. And also, I don't think Jake really, as a rider, I think Jake knows what he's doing. It's not because Cam Beaubier left. Right. He's breaking all the track records. He's breaking all the race records. His race times are way faster, like overall. And I think he just has tons of confidence. And I think he's coming in with tons of motivation.
Right. All right. That brings us to Gagne's teammate,
right,
Cameron Peterson. Now, this kid, well, I guess he's a kid. Well, they're all kids to us, right, Raj? But
right.
I mean, he's obviously very talented and I think he could ride any motorcycle that he threw his leg over. And this is going to be his second year, right? Second full year on that team. I think he had a great year last year, considering he was learning the ropes. But I think now he's probably to the point where he believes that he's ready to step up and challenge the rest of the guys, beginning with his teammate for a Superbike championship.
Well, also,
go ahead.
The question I have is he going to make that jump like Jake Gagne made his second year?
Exactly.
On that? It's a little unfair, though, to put that on him and say, hey, can you make that same jump? Because that jump that Gagne did was just incredible. That's like not something that happens very often at all. Somebody make that huge of a leap. I think the big thing for Cam Peterson, obviously he's got the talent, and he, you know, God, what a great guy. Love the opportunity that he's getting. He deserves it. that's just one thing, that just really like him, and just glad he's having the opportunity that he's having. But one thing I think sometimes, and this is easy to do when you get put on a team that's used to winning, you kind of put too much pressure on yourself.
Right.
And you start trying to force things. And then mistakes happen. And then you're like, man, I got to get out of this mistake, and so I think if he can not put all that pressure on himself, and I think he kind of figured that out as the year went on, right? Some mistakes early on in the year that he wasn't making at the end of the year.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. With Cam Peterson, this idea that he's like the number 2 rider. Well, I mean, I don't think that sets well with him as much as he loves his teammate and is good friends with Jake Gagne. I mean, there's a fire burning there too, and obviously his commitment to racing with getting this compartment surgery done, because he just felt like he needed that little bit more edge as he discovered some issues with Buttonwillow and said, I got to take care of this because this is my year, and it is a great opportunity for him. It's amazing to think that a couple of years ago, he was on the verge of not racing anymore, and kind of was out of racing completely, but turned it all around, and here he is, and that team, until that team is knocked off the pedestal, that team is the number 1 team. And I know, they all work hard within that crew. Obviously Jake is the defending champion, but they give Cameron Peterson as much on that team as they give to Jake. So, I think Cam Peterson feels like, if not him, then why not me, kind of thing. So it's just going to be interesting to see. I mean, with the guys we've talked about so far, it just seems like it's going to be so eye-opening when we get to Road Atlanta and see. And another one, and I want to bring this guy up. I want to bring PJ Jacobsen up, because he had a pretty decent year last year. He had a pole position. He had that sneak pass on Petrucci last year at Barber. He's kind of the incumbent on that team and has had a little bit more time on that BMW. And, he's still got a pretty big chip on his shoulder. It'll be interesting how having Cameron Beaubier on that team will help PJ or hurt him. We're not really sure, but he's still got something to show. And if that team is what we think it is, and if that bike it has what we think it can have, then he could be right there among the group as well. Roger, where do you think PJ is going to be this year?
Well, I think you said a lot of it that was right. I think he has a chip on his shoulder. He was out for a year. We talked about a couple other guys having that same issue. Man, I was really bummed out when I thought Cam Peterson, or not Cam Peterson, but PJ was maybe not going to get a ride this year.
Yeah.
Last year, I don't think there was one person who rode harder than PJ. And maybe he was getting everything out of that BMW and then some, and sometimes too much of it. And he was trying so hard. And you could see it in his riding. He was riding great. But you could see he was giving it all. There was nothing left. So I think for him now, with Beaubier on the team, that they can elevate each other. Have that teammate that might be a little quicker than you testing, and get to look at his data and kind of go back and forth with each other. And then also second year on the team, I think they can kind of figure out where they struggled at last year and carry that over to this year. But I definitely think PJ has a lot of motivation. It looked like it last year, and he was awesome to watch last year, and glad to see him coming back.
All right, this guy probably is the most difficult guy for me to talk about, and that's Matthew Skoltz. Now, the reason for that is I could sit here right now and I can't tell you if he's underachieving or if he's overachieving, and that's a weird dynamic, right? Like, is he underachieving because he's not on a factory bike? I'm sorry, is he underachieving because he hasn't done what we all thought he would do and give those guys more of a challenge at the front consistently, race to race? Or is he overachieving because he's doing as well as he is without a full factory bike? So, Roger, where do you look at that?
Well, it's hard to say. I mean, it's easy. Sometimes when you're the outside looking in, it looks easier or different than it is. But I think I think that's a really good team. I think it's a really good bike. They got a lot of good people there. Last year they bought a lot of attack parts. This year they have, new electronics. So I think they definitely have the bike and the team and the resources. I mean, that they want to win. There's no doubt about it. They want to win. And, I think the big thing, like you mentioned, was the consistency. It's kind of some years he kind of starts out really strong, and then in the middle might, have a couple off races, and then toward the end of the year comes back strong again. And I think that's just the thing for him, is just being consistent every weekend. And he definitely has the talent. I mean, you can look what he did in 2017 when he was on the stock bike. I mean, he was right there behind all the Superbike guys, just a couple seconds back. And so he definitely has the talent. He's put in some incredible rides before, and just being that consistent, and then also taking that next step.
Yeah, and one of the things I want to talk about that team. One of the things I kind of found out over this offseason that I didn't realize. So, you think when teams and riders within a series are on the same brand, obviously the bikes are not always the same. And I know there's a lot of attack components on the Westby Racing R1, which Roger pointed out. But one thing that was different last year that I didn't know about until this offseason is they were like a generation or two behind on the firmware, the Morelli electronics on it. So they were not able to manipulate the electronics and do quite as much as the attack team. And I don't know, it's arguable how much of a difference there really is. But from what I've heard from talking to Ed Sullivan, the crew chief on that team, they have that firmware update now, and they've been testing it this year and dialing some things in. So they are on the same level for electronics as the attack team this year, which is something they hadn't been before. So it remains to be seen. I know a couple of years ago, there was a situation where, this is going back to a few years, when the Westby team didn't have the full Morelli electronics. So, Matthew was very much a proponent of, wanting to get there with that. So they invested in the system. Well, then, the system, they didn't have the upgrade that attack had. So, one of the things Matthew has always looked for is to try to get on kind of equal equipment a little bit. One of the things that's not maybe equal, and that's not to disparage anything about the swing arm on the Westby bike, but I know, Matthew, I've heard he covets that billet swing arm that's proprietary that Attack Performance uses on both Jake's and Cam Peterson's bikes. So, sometimes it's one of those things where, do you see that somebody's got something else and you think, am I going to be better? I would be better if I was going to be on that. Or it's just like, don't worry about it and just ride the bike. But I have heard this year that these electronics have already made a difference for Matthew. He's going quicker. He's got better control of the bike on the edge of the tire. And engine braking better. There's a lot of stuff on it that's just better than it was before. So again, we're going to find out when we get to Road Atlanta what this all means, because it's minute changes, but it makes every bit of difference when you're on the edge of riding a super bike at full speed like those guys are. So it'll be interesting going into it.
Yeah, every little bit is huge. I mean, if you talk about over a lap, a track with a lot of corners, if it makes you a little bit better in each corner, then over the lap, it's going to make a huge difference. But, you just got to go into the air and not worry about what everybody else has.
Right.
And go and, try to beat them and prove that, that you're better without all that stuff. And I think for them, they're, from what I hear, their bike is pretty close. So we'll see. I think another guy, wants to come in. I think Matt's got to be motivated this year to reel off some wins, and definitely has the potential to do it.
All right. I think that we're getting close to being out of time here, but I think we'd be remiss to not talk about two more guys. And that's not disrespecting guys that we won't get to talk about. But I think we have to talk about Richie Escalante, and I think we have to talk about Hayden Gillum. Now, Richie Escalante, I think that both of you would agree. I mean, you're not going to find a nicer guy in the paddock, except for maybe Hayden Gillum. But anyway, Richie Escalante doesn't complain. He goes about his business. I think he takes it all in. I think he processes it. And I think he's the type that's going to continue to get better and not just stall out at some point. And I think this year is going to be a very big year for him. Last year was obviously his rookie season in the Superbike class. He had some great races. He made some mistakes that, we can expect a rookie, with that much on the line and that much pressure is going to make. Where do you see Richie at this point in his career, Roger?
I think just the last year he was really coming on strong. I mean, if you look at it, he was making some mistakes early on, and then when he got hurt at Brainerd, I think it was, he was making huge strides, and I think that's setting back a little bit. I think for him having that rookie year, and hopefully, it's hard when you're a rookie and you move to Superbike because you want to prove to everybody, prove to yourself you're one of the guys, and it's easy most guys do have their first year a lot of mistakes, and Richie had a couple, and I think now even with Tony coming in as his teammate, they get along well. I think they can work well together, and I think Richie can make a huge step, and the team can make a huge step too. It takes both. Right.
And that brings us to Hayden Gillum. Sean, I know how you feel about Hayden Gillum, how the rest of us feel. I mean, he's a wonderful guy, and he's one of those guys to me that just continues to surprise me. Like, you kind of push him to the back burner, and then he pushes himself right up to the front, and you push him to the back burner, and there he is again. And he's obviously a very gifted motorcycle racer, and I don't think there's a guy in the paddock that when it comes down to like having to really push through something, it'd be hard to bet against that guy from making it work.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny about Hayden, when we saw this at Daytona too, but I always have to chuckle about some, he'll tell you, I mean, obviously he's so devoted to his wife Summer and his son Stone, and thinks, I got a family to worry about, but then he does what he does at Daytona, and he was so upset about how things fell out at the 200, and we know obviously Richie Escalante's had some issues there too. So man, those guys are both coming into Road Atlanta, and they're just going to be on fire, I think. They're and Hayden, arguably, as well as good as he is on a super sport bike, I mean, they've got a year under their belts with that team with Disrupt Racing, and Hayden's working on that bike all the time, and I think he's absolutely going to be a factor. We've seen what he was doing in Stock 1000. So I mean, the bike is just so much better as he continues to ride it. So I really expect him to do some things. And hey, he's from Owensboro too. So Roger, what do you have to say about your boy?
Well, I mean, Paul talked about how talented he was. I mean, you go back to Daytona a couple of weeks ago, he was top 3 in the bagger practice and top 3 in the Daytona 200 practice.
Yes.
First practice. Those can't be two totally different bikes. And, last year he impressed a lot in Stock 1000. That team kind of, their first, I think, full year in MotoAmerica, and there was a couple mistakes. And not, he might have won the Stock 1000 title. And I think for him, was out for a while. And last year he was riding a Stock 1000 and they had a super bike. And I think that can be a little bit difficult when you got two bikes that are really close but not the same. And then also for the team to, it's an extra bike that you have to, take account for it. And I think for them having a year, talk about a guy that doesn't have all the bells and whistles of a superbike. They have some superbike parts, but they don't have as many as the other guys for sure. And for him, I think there's nobody riding better right now. You come from Daytona and what he did last year, and it's going to be see what kind of huge step that he can make this year. And I think his goal is going to be to tag on to the other Suzukis and see if they can't be the top Suzuki guy this year.
Yeah, and I also like the fact that Hayden kind of shoots a hole in that, dads can't be fast thing, because, there's always that feeling, oh, it'll slow them down when they have kids. My dad always said, like, I had more mouths to feed, you got to make money. It's more, it's not bad pressure that it puts on you. It's like, it's good stuff. You gotta do the business to make the money and take care of your family.
Right. You got to buy diapers, right?
That's right. Diapers and food. It's not cheap anymore. Not that it ever was, but
Hey, Paul, I got a question for Roger, which is another rider we haven't mentioned. And I'm not even gonna preface it. I'm just gonna mention the name and ask Roger to evaluate. Roger, Ashton Yates.
Uh, I think for him is kind of, we talked about some other guys without a lot of experience, just a little inconsistency. Uh, also some bad luck. Like one year that the Honda didn't come out till late. This year, I think it's going to be a telling year for him. He's going to be on the same team for the second year, and they're going to have a better starting point going into the year at all the tracks. So definitely has a talent. We've seen him right there, top 6 in some of the Superbike races. So we'll see this year. I think it's going to be a big one for him.
Yeah, and there's rumors around that team that there's a possibility that they may finally make the commitment and get that new bike. It's kind of a little bit of wait and see. We don't really know, as we talked about with Cameron Beaubier and PJ, is we're not really sure about that bike in its newest iteration this year, the 2023 M1000RR, but that team may finally make the jump to that bike. But I think you're right. He's going to benefit from a second year. He's got his dad and his grandfather on the team with him again. So there's a lot of comfort there. And, Road Atlanta obviously is his home track too. He's a Georgia boy. So it'll be interesting to see what goes on with that team. They're always a little bit of an unknown. And that's another one of those like Westby Racing where you wonder if Ashton Yates could benefit, if Matthew Skoltz could benefit from having a teammate to share data with. We haven't seen that with either of those riders yet. And, it would be interesting to see if that could ever happen someday. Maybe they ought to be on a team together or something.
Yeah, it's I know we give Shivey a lot of crap about that old bike.
Yeah.
But damn, I still think your motorcycle needs to be younger than your rider. Anyway, that's just me.
That's right. Hey, Paul, so one other thing I want to talk to Roger about, I know we're running out of time, but Roger, so I generally end these podcasts by doing a little bit of a spiel about, well, usually it's corner workers. And again, we need corner workers for Road Atlanta. So go to the MotoAmerica Volunteers page. But I want to talk to you, Roger, a little bit about Live Plus, because, we're obviously pushing subscriptions, and I've made a lot of pleads to people about cut the cord, consume your entertainment the way you want to. You don't need to be a slave to what's on TV. You can choose your apps and choose your subscription, do what you want. And people that subscribe to Live Plus get, wall to wall Roger Hayden with his insight that he provides. It's incredible. I mean, it's fantastic. But from an insider's point of view, Roger, tell us about Live Plus, your take on it, what you think of it, especially from a rider that when you raced, you didn't have something like that. So I bet you wish you did, huh?
I definitely wish I did, because you can go back and watch the practices and the qualifiers and see exactly, what everybody was doing, how consistent they was, or were they making mistakes, different lines and all that. So it would be great and then go back and watch the races as easy as it is. And, I stream a lot of sports. I mean, NASCAR, football, everything. And there's not a streaming app. And I'm not saying this just because I work there. There's not an easier streaming app than a MotoAmerica Live Plus one. As soon as you click the button and it comes up, it's working. My dad watch, my mom, and they're not real handy on the phone or the iPad. And they never had an issue or needed somebody to come up there and help them get on. Where some of the other racing apps, somebody always had to come help them. So that's one thing I think that's great for it. And you just get to see all the action. You get to see all the practices and all the qualifiers. Even if you don't sit there and watch it, you can at least have it on as background noise. And, for guys that do club races or track days or, amateur racers, you can learn a lot by listening and watching, not just us, but listening to the riders and how they approach each session. If you're a young guy or a track day guy, what's a better opportunity than watch Live Plus and see what the pros are doing during practice, qualifying, and then try to emulate that. And also, just the racing the last couple of years has been incredible. And one thing for me was it's way harder than I thought to talk all day, but it's awesome to see it growing, and it's great for the sport.
All right, boys.
Roger, sorry, Paul. Roger, you must walk through the paddock. What is it? Are you more popular now as a Live Plus guy than you even were as a rider? Is it about the same? What's it like when you walk around the paddock? Do people just go crazy when they see you?
No, it's about the same, but I don't really get to walk around the paddock.
Right.
He's stuck.
I'm in all day, so I get I get some messages on Instagram like, "Hey, I was hoping to bump into you this past weekend, but I didn't see you." But I'm like, "Well, who you heard on the loudspeaker? That was me." I'm like, I'm in the booth all day, so I don't really get to walk around until the end of the day when most people are gone.
Basically, we just slide food under the door.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny.
Sometimes we don't even get that.
Exactly.
Yeah, Paul, sometimes it's funny, right? We see Roger, a lot of times he'll walk past where we're sitting and go into that room, and then we don't see him the rest of the day. And then he comes out of there and it's like, oh, hey, Roger, how are you doing?
Yeah, I think I saw him more before he worked for us than when he did.
Yeah. 100%.
Okay, I got one question and then I'm gonna let you go. I know you're a big sports fan. So are my San Diego State Aztecs gonna win this Final Four thing?
I hope they win tomorrow night. I do hope that. They have been playing good, but I think UConn has got it.
All right.
Oh, wow. Roger.
I don't have a dog in the fight. I would like to see an underdog win it, but I just think UConn has the coach and the team. So we'll see.
All right.
Yeah,
with that, we'll let you go. Are you, Sean, you all good?
Yeah, I'm good, except now I'm concerned. Well, not concerned. I'm rooting for SDSU because of you, Paul. But, as a Syracuse fan, I cannot stand the University of Connecticut. They're better now that Jim Calhoun's not there. But just to hear Roger say they're going to win it all, I will die if they are the national champions. So,
I can tell you one thing. As a lifelong San Diego fan of everything, they will make it painful.
Yeah.
Like, if they do win, it'll be by the skin of their teeth, or they'll lose by the skin of their teeth, but they'll somehow make it so that, my heart beats too quickly.
Hopefully they win by more than 3.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, boys. Thank you. That was a lot of fun. And I think our listeners will enjoy hopefully some good insight into the series, that maybe they learned some things that they didn't already know. So you guys take care of yourselves, and Roger, we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
All right. See you, Paul. Thanks.
I'm
See you,
good.
Sean.
Yeah. See you, Roger.